Stations like WGN in Chicago. It's really been a boon for us to have Dan Bongino doing best of shows this week. It's really helped us come up. People have really switched over and checked us out. So if you're a Dan Bongino listener and you're over here, thank you so much for checking us out.
Let me ask you this. A great movie from 50 years ago is still great. So if you don't think the Dan Bongino show from last week isn't still great this week, you're nuts.
Oh, it's relevant. Yeah,
you're just a moron. You're just a dope.
Yeah, it's, Joe Biden is still as ridiculous as he was 6 weeks ago when Dan said it for the 50th time.
I'm using the wired headphones because I'm saving that 100% fully charged wireless thing for it's day one of leaf raking day for Brad. This is my favorite time of the year.
Don't you have a blower? Don't you want to blow them on your neighbor's yard?
I don't have a blower.
Oh, you can borrow mine if you want. I'll bring it.
No, I would never do that. That's not how I roll.
It's not.
Let's put it this way: if I did that, it would cover up the trash that I throw over there.
Well, there's always something, isn't there?
Yeah, it would get away. Okay. Are you ready?
I am.
Ready for the thing? All right. It is the Brad and Britt cast. It's our last one for this week. We're glad you're with us here. A lot of things to take care of. I can give you some choices here. You can pull something out of your ass like you usually do. I've got 7 asses I can pull from. So what do you think?
7 asses. Well, let's start with this one. The Wall Street Journal publishing a letter from former President Donald Trump alleging the election was rigged. He particularly talks about Pennsylvania. Many people, this has been something that you've talked about for a number of years, and I believe you've actually had letters published attacking various newspapers for just putting letters out there without fact-checking them at all and letting people distribute bullshit.
There you go.
Which is what the Wall Street Journal actually did yesterday. The Washington Post had the best comeback to this, where they kind of just listed in order, but a lot of people did the bullshit, the tropes, the debunked claims that Donald Trump had out there. The Wall Street Journal, unfortunately, just let it ride.
Well, look at it this way. Think of how low you've sunk when the best you can do to get whatever message you think you have out there at this point is to write a letter and get it published in the Wall Street Journal. Now, keep in mind what the Journal did here, and I've read the whole thing. It's of course it's ridiculous. It's just all the same bullshit that you've heard a million times. But the Wall Street Journal letter department says 200 words or less. Mm-hmm. This was 600 words. So what does that mean? What that means is it's really an op-ed column. Now, an op-ed column in a newspaper like the Wall Street Journal usually would somewhat reflect the views of the editorial page of the paper, which is right-wing, put up with Trump's bullshit for years and years and years and years, occasionally scold him for going, but really, you know, they didn't vote for Joe Biden, the people at the Wall Street Journal editorial board. Is that fair enough to say?
I would say
so
that's fair.
They hide behind their own policy and disregard it by calling that a letter. No, because remember, if it's a column, it's more easily attached to the newspaper itself. But guess what? It doesn't matter. The letter is the letter, and it's there. And you printed more bullshit from Donald Trump. You gave him a form. Now, what's the response to that? Well, Facebook cut him off. He can't get his message out. So at least we don't do that at the Wall Street Journal. Hey, bullshit. Just bullshit to that. Okay. So we saw where you were going. We saw where you're going. And what's happened is, and this has been kind of a slow motion, behind the scenes, really wonky. How much are you into the media train wreck at the Wall Street Journal? Because it is such a schizophrenic, two-sided publication.
Yeah.
And it becomes more and more of that all the time. How long ago did Rupert Murdoch buy the Wall Street? It's been at least 10 years. So
correct. Yeah.
He owns it. And remember the promise that he made when he bought it, that he was going to keep it as great as it was.
Right.
Okay. And it was known still for having good journalism, but a very conservative editorial page. Well, what's happened since then? Of course, the editorial page has gotten more and more crazy ass, Rupert Murdoch-like, not that much different from the New York Post or Fox News.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what they've done over the years. And of course, printing this column and labeling it a letter is kind of the apogee of all that. So what's happened? The people who write the real news in the Wall Street Journal, not on the editorial pages, but elsewhere, the ones who break big stories about important news items, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and the Washington Post, you can mention all three together in the amount of news they broke about Trump while he was president. They nailed his ass a lot of the times, but that was not the editorial page, right? Different.
Right.
So this moment has really opened up the chasm, and the writers who are not on the editorial page, the real reporters, many of whom may have come from the New York Times themselves, may have come from the Washington Post, have good pedigrees, good journalists. They're it's like having an uncle at Thanksgiving who just burps and farts through the whole meal, but damn it, he's in your family. There's nothing you can do about it. Gotta have him there. So they've got an editorial page, and Rupert Murdoch owns the paper. So I find it interesting at minimum. And as always, we have to ask, what happens when Rupert dies? Now, we know he never will die, and we know Trump will never die, so we will have to put up with these two scourges on the American scene, apparently forever. They'll never die.
Rush Limbaugh died back in February. These people will. There's an expiration date on everybody.
Oh, yeah, you want to bet
on this planet. I know that you've been watching some of the World Series probably this week. Have you seen their advertisements for the Fox Weather Channel?
No, but I've actually looked at the website. I've looked at the website, and I looked at the people that are going to be presenting the weather. And it's just like everything else. There's a facade of legitimacy, but underneath it, there are people who have written books about climate science. Well, what do you think they've written in those books about climate science and climate change? That it's clearly a man-made issue that needs to be addressed legislatively and by governments around the world to save them? Of course not. Of course not. So it's going to be exactly to weather what Fox Business is to business, which is nothing. It will be a facade that will cover up not very explicitly what their agenda is, which is more right-wing bullshit. Okay? Right-wing bullshit. And they're going to brighten up the way weather is presented. Right. So when a hurricane comes in, here's the good news. Hurricanes coming in, your clothes will dry that much faster when you hang them out to dry now. They may dry in 4 minutes. What the hell are you going to do? How are you going to change that?
One of the guys that they've hired is a guy from Charlotte who worked at a station we used to work for.
Yeah,
Fox
I saw that. Nick, what's his name? Yeah.
Kosier, I think is the guy's last name, and he made his name. You may have seen by doing a bunch of dancing videos on social media.
Wasn't he? And we didn't know him very well. No. Did we ever meet him?
I don't think we crossed paths, and I don't
wasn't
think
he
we
thought of as kind of a flake.
Yeah,
a bit of a flake.
I mean he's a lot more flash than substance or whatever, but I think that's what they're doing. I don't think they're like, man, this is the hard weather guy. I don't think, there's one of like your Sam Champions or some guys like that who are really into it and really, I don't think he's that guy. Well, he's the dancing video guy.
Well, it's not just that. And again, I don't know the economics of these kinds of really super specialized cable channels, but the Weather Channel on TV has been around for about 30 years. It was started by that crank John Coleman, who's dead, who, by the way, was a climate he was a denier, but he did not inject it into the way the weather was presented or what was talked about, to his credit. And now you hear the folks who are on the Weather Channel, they're very open and honest about what's going on. And I think you can trust what they say. They absolutely, they've built their reputation on that. And I'm sure if we could ever see the audience ratings for the Weather Channel, it probably is a flat line that just goes straight up when there's a hurricane, then back down, or straight up when there's a giant snowstorm. And so they have to have people ready to go, ready to move. It's expensive, that kind of coverage,
but it's also a cash cow. I mean, it's massive. Right. I mean, they just milk that cash cow. Right. Everything can be sponsored. But you can have it on everywhere.
I understand that, but you know what the biggest enemy of the Weather Channel is? It's not going to be Fox Weather. It's this. It's that thing in your hand.
And they do well.
It's like everything else.
They do well in that space too. Their app is fine, and they've been able to monetize that as well.
But most of us just look at our phone and we look at the box that has the weather forecast, and we move on.
Right, which is a lot of times from the Weather Channel, and they've been able to sponsor all that and do very well there. We have not mentioned the death of Mort Saul, who passed away, I believe, at the age of 94 this week, being credited with a guy who really pivoted comedy in a way when he came up and started really making an impact in the early to mid 50s. The Bob Hope and Henny Youngman type of comedy was really what happened, and he helped kind of change things, and he led to some of the stuff that they've been talking about. Like, if you wouldn't have seen Mort Saul, there would have been no Dave Chappelle. I think that Bill Maher also kind of owes sort of what he is to a Mort Saul. By the mid to late 60s, he had already kind of fallen out of fashion, but he, of course, continued to perform for a number of years. Mort Saul passing away at the age of 94. Your thoughts on that?
Mort Saul. I did read a lot about him again the last few days to remind myself of just what happened. Why did he kind of fade? And then you'd see him pop up every once in a while. He'd have a special or he'd have a show, and it would never really catch on through the late 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way through. And, he was kind of the original libertarian conspiracy theorist guy also. Mm-hmm. So, when the Kennedy assassination occurred, well, you know where he was. I mean, so he would latch on to all those kinds of things and weave it into his act. But you know what? He never compromised.
No.
And so, you have to just give complete credit for somebody who lives their whole life, doesn't compromise their art, and says, I'm not going to sell out. I'm not going to sell out to do a sitcom to make some money or whatever a lot of comedians do. Tim Allen.
He didn't make the cut for the new Buzz Lightyear thing.
Right.
It's gonna be Chris Evans that does the young Buzz Lightyear.
Really?
Yeah.
So is that liberal media prejudice? Is that cancel culture against him?
It's a
I'm sure he's
prequel,
claiming
so
it.
I'm not sure if 70-something-year-old Tim Allen could play a young Buzz Lightyear. I don't know if that's what you wanted to do, but yeah,
Well,
I'm sure that's what it is.
I don't think people who see Buzz Lightyear cartoons know how old the people are who are.
Well, but they know that like a young Buzz Lightyear doesn't sound like he's Tim Allen doesn't sound like a young guy. He sounds like an older guy.
Does he sound like an old man now?
Yeah,
I didn't notice.
Much. Yeah.
I didn't notice that. But then, of course, you always stick up for the man. That's been your thing all the way through, isn't it?
Yeah, Tim Allen's been canceled. That's the problem by the Disney Pixar folks.
Yeah.
He's been canceled by that guy.
Of all the things I read about Mort Saul, the names that I did not see come up, that are connective tissue between, as you said, Mort Saul and all the way up to Dave Chappelle. You have your Bill Maher's and Shelley Berman and Woody Allen and George Carlin and there's a lot. The Smothers Brothers.
Oh yeah.
The Smothers Brothers. And I've heard from more than one person, I've read from more than one person that there are people who believe that Tommy Smothers may have been one of the top 5 greatest producers in the history of television. He had such, and by the way, they're both still around. I shouldn't talk about them in the past tense. They're both still around. But I was looking at some old clips the other day from their show. It got canceled in 1968, 69 by CBS. And the guest that walks out stands in between them, Don Rickles. Okay. Yeah. Now you cannot think of a more, how could that be? How could it be? And of course, it was fantastic. It was great. Don Rickles just stood in between the two of them and just flattened them, just killed them, and it was perfect. It was just a wonderful, wonderful moment. Back to Mort Saul, though. There are some clips of Mort Saul who, again, at the top of his game, was in a class by himself. His ability to analyze and bring to the comedic stage what no one else dared do. And I was watching a clip of him the other day, and he gets introduced by Kate Smith. Okay. God bless America.
Right.
I've heard they sing that at baseball games. I'm not sure, but I hear they do.
Well, the Philadelphia Flyers really loved her. They did exceptionally well when she would sing.
So she's hosting, she's hosting the Hollywood Palace, which was, of course, the poor man's Ed Sullivan show that was on for several years. And it was just like Sullivan, just a bunch of different acts would come out, but they'd have a different guest host every week. So Kate Smith introduces Mort Saul. This is 1965, early 1965. Lyndon Johnson has just been elected. He wasn't reelected because he wasn't elected president the first time. And we're going to be correct on this podcast. We're not going to fall and make mistakes like that. Johnson was never reelected. He declined to run again in 1968. But back to 65. Mort Saul walks out, and his persona, he'd always walk out with a newspaper. He'd stand there with a newspaper. And if you think for one moment about how long ago that was and how vanilla you think entertainment was then, that you couldn't do anything, you couldn't say it, you couldn't approach, watch Mort Saul do it like a surgeon. Say things that people might not even say today, but he did it. He was that good. He was a young guy, and he really had his hands around the moment, I thought. But this is like, remember, this would be like Dave Chappelle becoming a judge on Dancing with the Stars. It can't happen. It doesn't fit. Mort Saul on the Hollywood, it really doesn't seem to fit, but it did, and he did. So those are just snippets. That's just anecdotal stuff that I've gleaned the last few days. Glad you brought it up, because I've forgotten that we let it go by, because he is one of the building blocks, right? He's one of the foundations of if you see a political comedian today, it's all about Mort Saul.
And when they talk about a lot of guys who change stand-up comedy, it's usually people who do some blue material, they do some sexual stuff, your Lenny Bruce's, your Richard Pryors and stuff like that. And he wasn't like that. He changed it in a very different way. It was very much, he made it more of a thinking thing, you know. That was interesting. And when you go back to the Smothers Brothers, when you look at their legacy, the people that came out of that show, like Super Dave was one of the guys that came out of that show. I think Chevy Chase was a writer for that show. Several
all
people.
right, so they weren't perfect.
I am ready to take my pick from your choices.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Shame on you, Jerry Falwell. Again.
Oh boy.
Richard Burr in for Kramer tonight on Mad Money. Or it's Joe Biden who should have ended his speech with, "You can't always get what you want."
I got to do the Richard Burr thing because I'm not familiar with this story. I don't know about this one.
Here we go. This expands on something that we might have known, but I'm not sure that we knew it, because once it becomes the province of ProPublica, the folks who do investigative journalism because it's the right thing to do and we need somebody to do it, and they do it, and they break a lot of major stories. Here's the latest one. After Richard Burr dumped more than $1.6 million in stocks in February 2020, a week before the coronavirus market crash, he called his brother-in-law, according to the SEC, and they talked for all of 50 seconds. Burr, according to the SEC, had material non-public information regarding the incoming economic impact of coronavirus. The very next minute, Burr's brother-in-law called his broker. Previously, it was reported that his brother-in-law, whose name is Gerald Fauth, F-A-U-T-H, a member of the National Mediation Board, had dumped stock the same day Burr did. But it was previously unknown that Burr and Fauth spoke that day, and their contact came just before Fauth began the process of dumping stock himself. Revelations come as a part of an effort by the SEC to force Mr. Fauth to comply with a subpoena that the agency said he has stonewalled for more than a year. Is there any fucking Republican in this country who cares about rule of law and will respond to a subpoena? Is there any of them?
No, zero, none, zip, zilch. But if somebody doesn't show up for a Benghazi hearing, you're going to jail forever.
In the filings, the Securities and Exchange Commission also revealed that there's an ongoing insider trading investigation still into both Richard Burr and Fauth's trades, which explains so much as to why you hear Richard Burr say nothing ever in public about anything, let alone about Trump. According to the SEC, Fauth cited a medical condition for why he can't comply with a subpoena. Yeah, I'm sick of
oh, shut up! A medical condition.
Although he has been healthy enough to continue his duties at the National Mediation Board. In their filings, the SEC accuses Mr. Fauth of engaging in a relentless battle to dodge the subpoena. In 2017, President Trump appointed Mr. Fauth to the three-person board. Oh, boy. The day he got the call from Richard Burr, Fauth sold between $97,000 and $280,000 worth of shares in 6 companies, including several that were particularly hard hit in the market swoon and economic downturn. According to the SEC, the first broker he called after hearing from Burr was out of his office, so he called another broker to execute the trade. So they were in a panic. They couldn't reach the first guy. I'll find somebody to execute these trades.
This is as close to catching somebody red-handed at this shit as they ever get in Washington. I mean, this is like there's like 50 smoking guns, and they're causing a 6-alarm fire, right? They never are able to connect the threads perfectly to nail somebody in this, and this is pretty much as close as you could ever get to doing that.
Richard Burr defends his actions again, saying he relied solely on public information, including reports from CNBC to inform his trades, and did not rely on information he obtained as a senator.
We'll see.
His attorney, named Alice Fisher, told ProPublica at the time that Senator Burr participated in the stock market based on public information and did not coordinate his decision to trade on February 13th with Mr. Fauci. I'll bet you Richard Burr has a calendar in his office, an old paper, and he rips a page off every day. And he can't wait to get to January 3rd, 2023, or whenever it is that the new senators are sworn in, and one of them won't be him. It's just amazing. I mean, the only thing he stands to really lose is that prime parking spot at the airport that has his name on it.
It's got his name on it and everything.
By the way, you don't need it. Believe me, there's always plenty of parking at the airport.
Yeah, it's fine.
At Greensboro, Winston-Salem. Hasn't ever been a problem.
It doesn't matter. He's not going to face any sanctions. Everybody knows, and he's been dirty as anybody on this, and now he's not even being careful. And here's the other thing: you can tell that he's not running for re-election because he admits to watching CNBC. If he was a real conservative, he'd be watching Fox Business, right? That's where he'd be getting his training.
Yeah, good point. Good point, Lou Rukeyser Jr.
I thought I nailed that one.
Way to go.
I took that thing home for a landing.
Yeah. How about shame on you, Jerry Falwell?
Yeah, let's do that. Shame on you, Jerry Falwell.
And remember, Jerry Falwell is dead. We're not talking about Jerry Falwell Jr., the country music star. Excuse me. He's a country music song come to life, right? Liberty University is potentially running afoul of the tax code by claiming to be a nonprofit organization while having a main goal of electing political candidates. In a recording obtained by Politico, Liberty University President Jerry Prevost, this is not Falwell Jr., this is the guy after, now.
Isn't it just a pseudonym? Couldn't they have picked something better? They're faking this guy. They're saying that Falwell Jr. is not. They call him Prevost. Sure.
Right. He was telling the university's senior vice president that he wanted the university to be more effective at political activity. Are they getting people elected? Which is one of our main goals. Are they really motivating our conservative people to get out to vote? If they are, we ought to be seeing some changes in elected officials, and we ought to some extent. All I want to do is make us more effective. And of course, if you're a nonprofit organization, you're not supposed to engage in explicit political activities like this. So I think, without reading anything more about this, the game will be, very simply, like everything else right now, can we run out the clock and hope that Republicans take back the Congress, and then all is well again? We can continue to be as dishonest and disrespectful of the Constitution and laws as we wish. No one will investigate us. Nothing. And just remember, if the Republicans gain control of the House of Representatives on day one, mark my words, Snurdly, not only will every investigation about January 6th, of course, completely disappear, but instantly there will be hearings about the origination of the coronavirus as an intentional Chinese hit on the world, funded by Anthony Fauci and the people he directed. And we're going to get that will be on day one. And when I say day one, usually, it's like the next day or the day after. But that is suddenly, and those hearings will be televised, and all of them will be televised. It won't be like the Democrats are doing right now, where the January 6th hearings, right? We saw one day of it, right? One day of it, and now nothing else. And so remember, if it's not on TV, it's not really happening for enough of America for it to matter. But the Republicans are not so stupid. When they decide to have public hearings trying to tag everybody, including Joe Biden himself, for why we had a coronavirus outbreak, it'll be Biden's fault, okay? It won't matter. The truth will mean nothing. It'll be on TV live all the time, at least on one channel, right?
Right.
And that'll be enough. So that's why there's so much on the line here. And that's why, as we speak, drips of sweat are coming from a lot of folks across the country, and for good reason, because if there's a half-ass vote that doesn't win on the infrastructure bill. What Nancy Pelosi, I never put a bill down for a vote unless I know I have the votes, but we're going to vote today no matter what. What do you have the votes? Well, we don't know. This one says that one says that. We're not sure, but there is going to be a vote, right? Yes. And when Joe Biden steps off the plane in Europe, there should be something for him to celebrate, right? Right. Are we sure that's going to happen? No, because the progressives refuse to vote on this. They're saying unless they get the other part that's been whittled down from 6 trillion to 3.5 trillion to 1.75 trillion. And we're not happy with that. And what does Kirsten Sinema think? Well, she likes this part, but doesn't like the other part. What about Joe Manchin? Well, he likes the other part, but he doesn't like this part. Well, how are we going to bring them together? I don't know. Hey, Joe Biden says, come on over to the White House. We'll all talk about it. This will be the 15th time we've sat there in a room. Think about the worst thing that you've ever had happen in your marriage. Every one of you. It's arguing over the same thing with your spouse over and over and over again and never reaching a conclusion.
Right.
That's what this feels like. But on the other hand, it's only because we're seeing it happen with the kind of scrutiny that there has never, ever been ever in the history of the world. I really doubt that during the New Deal, every day there was angst and hand-wringing in public over what Franklin Roosevelt was going to do. He said, this is what I want. The Congress did it. He had a huge majority. Bam, they got it cranked out. Same with Lyndon Johnson. Not quite so easy, but it still got done. We're in a different kind of world right now, so we're seeing it happen. I forgot to do this. I was going to do it right before we started. I wanted to look up the origin of and we always look for the hackneyed cliche phrases that just get thrown out and used over and over and over again. And our favorite one of the day here on the Pee Wee Herman, Brad, and Britt cast is making sausage. We're seeing the sausage being made in public. Now, is the production of sausage in reality the worst thing on earth? Because that's how it must be if you present any kind of painful process that involves negotiating or getting to a conclusion that is going to be difficult to reach. It's you don't want to see the sausage being made. Well, no, I don't want to see a pig being dropped into some machine and ground. You're
it's
right.
Nasty. It's bloody, and then there's a casing and all.
Isn't there something else? Isn't there something else on Earth besides sausage? Can we come up with something else? Okay, but just remember those videos of what McNuggets looked like before they were real? They looked like shit droppings from a dodo bird from the year 5 million BC. Okay, what was so good about that?
But do you now overall, and I'm not sure, obviously the impact here, but there a lot of times you hear about conservative voters. If they don't get what they want, they stay at home. And there are a lot of progressive voters out there. There are a lot of them, and they thought, we're going to get X. We're going to get paid leave. Paid leave was one thing that the progressive wing of the party had said, it's going to happen. Stand by. We're going to get Medicaid expansion. That's absolutely 100% going to happen. And these people said, okay, we're going to go forward with this. We're not crazy about Joe Biden. We're not crazy, but we're going to do this. And now these people are getting the back of their hand slapped again. They're getting nothing out of this whole situation. Well, and I know the answer is, well, what are you fucking going to do? Vote for Donald Trump? And I don't think that you can't really throw that at those people.
Well, but that's why Joe Biden got elected. That's exactly. A lot of why Joe Biden got elected.
Exactly.
What the fuck do you want, Trump?
Yeah.
And then Joe Biden won the primaries because Jim Clyburn turned everything around in South Carolina, and it was off to the races. Okay. Remember how this is going to be positioned. If first of all, I don't know about you, $1.75 trillion is still a lot of money. Okay. And, a lot of good things will happen even at this reduced level if this starts to move through. Some people's lives will be changed, lives will be made better by this. But if the lefties, if the progressives, I think there's 98 who say they're members of that caucus on the Democratic side, if they bitch and whine and don't wholeheartedly sell this, and behind everyone's back say, well, I didn't want to vote for it, but this is what I did. It sucked, blah, 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 blah. It's not half a loaf. It's not even a third of a loaf. It's a quarter of a loaf. That's not good enough for me either. Yeah, you are going to send the signal to, remember the small margin that Joe Biden won by in a couple of states that had 40,000 votes switched, Trump would still be president, and he wouldn't have had to have staged a coup to be president. He actually would have been reelected because of the Electoral College. You know, Biden would have won the popular vote by what? 8 million,
right.
and Trump would be president, which, you know, it's bad enough it happened 4 years ago. It would have been worse. It would have just happened this year. And the possibility of it happening the next time in 2024 starts to loom also. That would be 3 in a row. Gee, if it happens 3 times in a row, is there a problem with our system? No, it's perfect. Can't tamper with it. Let's not change it. But I think you generally have it right. And this will be converted probably, unfortunately, into not only did we not get what we voted for, okay,
right,
as if people go to the polls thinking, well, if I vote for this, I get this, all right, which is it's a dreadful way to pick a candidate or pick a party. I vote for them, I get this shit. It's not a good way to do it, because we have a system that by definition waters down any campaign promises that anybody makes on any side. It just, that's the way this is.
And this is really this is the second time that Biden's been through this, because they went with the American Recovery and Restoration Act with Obama, when they pared it down and pared it down and pared it down and pared it down.
Right.
I mean,
and what happened? We had a slower recovery than otherwise probably would have been.
Exactly, because you can't let that black guy have credit for really having the American economy recover. You can't have that happen.
And now we can't have the old white guy getting credit
can't.
for transforming the American economy and making it so that people at the bottom have much more of a chance to advance. And we can't make it so that the children are not consigned to a life of poverty because, unfortunately, they were born to the wrong parents. We cannot do that. That we cannot do. I can't remember where I read this. I saw it this morning. And you've heard the parallels between what's trying to be accomplished right now and some other great giant projects of the past. And the interstate highway system, it's said, was not funded by bake sales.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was the result of a bipartisan commitment that was led by a Republican president. And it was decided this is what we need to do, the interstate highway system in the 1950s. Could you imagine anything? I'm sure if you had to rebuild the interstate highway system or build it from zero right now, the costs would, you don't have enough zeros on your calculator, right, on how much it would have cost. So, of course, in retrospect, it's one of the greatest bargains ever. Now, of course, it needs fixing in a lot of places. A lot of highways are beaten up. A lot of them are 50 and 60 years old, but it's still easier to repave than to reclaim the land and start with eminent domain and start doing shit over again. And I think that's a great analogy to what is trying to be accomplished right now, not just with the Infrastructure Act, which, by the way, none of those projects to rebuild airports and bridges and tunnels and water systems and broadband, none of those can be achieved with bake sales or GoFundMe pages either.
No.
It takes legislative success in the Congress. And same with the bigger discussion going on right now over the almost $2 trillion being spent on all the programs that you talked about before. None of those can happen without success legislatively here in the very near term. And if not, and you hate to say, well, the reason to do this is because it's Armageddon if it doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
If progressives hold their breath and refuse and say, no, if we can't get what we want, you get nothing, Joe Biden. And effectively, next Tuesday, you'll see a Republican governor elected in Virginia. That will be taken as Donald Trump is still the king of America.
He's back, baby.
And the highway doesn't need to be repaved. It's already there for Donald Trump to glide back in, unless something unfortunate were to happen to him health-wise or something of that sort. We can't count on that. This is the all-time series of sports cliches. Backs against the wall, no tomorrow, 110%, give it all, get it done, get the ball over the goal line. You have to do it. You must do it. And it would really, really be sad. It would be terrible for the country. And I haven't looked for the last hour or so. The financial markets loved what they saw this morning. You know what they saw? They saw progress on a lot of fronts, and they saw not the kind of tax increases that had been talked about. These are rational, reasonable tax increases that would help pay for this. They like that. If this blows up, well, as I always like to say on so many things, Britt, I will lose so much more money in the financial markets than I would ever gain from X, blah, 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 blah. So keep the train running in the correct direction, and it will be better for everyone. And as Joe Biden says, and he says the same things at every speech if you watch him. I mean, he's got a limited, a vocabulary and examples too. But he is completely correct in saying that when the middle class does well, everybody does well. Rich people do well. Poor people do better. That's how it works. From the middle out, from the bottom up, not from the top down. So they knocked out this billionaire's tax, and they said, oh, that was a non-starter. But they have more conventional tax increases on some of the more traditional ways that you raise taxes. And that should be the way to go. And
there you see President Manchin saying that he didn't take the.
Well, that's already old news. We already know that. I just said that, so we know.
Well, but I understand, but it's again, he's not real sure about that. He doesn't like that. He doesn't. Well, I don't know about that.
You ready for here's the dumbest thing, and I heard this.
Yeah.
God love you, MSNBC. I love you. God love you, CNN. I love you. But honest to God, when you talk about Joe Manchin and his opposition to the billionaire's tax, and he's made millions of dollars off of coal investments and the rest, but particularly with the billionaire tax, please do not say, how could Joe Manchin be against that? There aren't even any billionaires in his state.
Right.
I want you to think how stupid the premise is. As if there are 50 senators, there are 100 senators. It's not relevant that it's so blindly stupid and irrelevant to the argument.
No, but let me.
Okay, there's two billionaires in my state. I'm now for it. I'm against it.
Let me offer the counter argument, because he's always been, I want to do what's right for the people of West Virginia. If I can sell it in West Virginia, I'll do it. So this has fucking nothing to do with West Virginia. This has nothing, zero, zilch, nada, full stop to do with, hey, Mountain Mama, take me home, country roads. It has zero to do with West Virginia. And he's out there fretting, I don't know about the billionaires. We have to save them. And he has zero within the state that he supposedly loves so much.
But wait, that argues, actually, if you've eliminated everything that you know about anything, it would supposedly free you up to be for that tax. wow, at least I'm not affecting anybody in my own state. If you
Exactly.
think that senators are so parochial that they vote about shit for people in
yes, but he's always been the West Virginia guy. And now it's like, nah, fuck West Virginia. I'm worried about billionaires other places. You know, it's just that's the odd thing that's being pointed out here.
Britt, you have to take the famous Republican argument, which maybe Joe Manchin thinks, yeah, there aren't any in West Virginia right now, but one day there might be. And right, there are aspiring billionaires.
Right.
As the son, I thought that governor is a billionaire. That bloated guy.
No, he's only got like 800 million, so fuck him. He's not there yet. So no, but it's as the sun is setting, we can all see it on fossil fuels. They're trying to milk the last 50 years out of that they possibly can. Right. He's out there trying to do whatever he's doing, yes, to help make sure that we get the last ounce of coal out of the mountains of West Virginia as it collapses on people with black lung disease. But yeah, it's just weird that all of a sudden the guy who is everything that he has is tunnel visioned on the state of West Virginia every single time. And he says to Joe Biden a million times, I'm telling you, Joe, if I can sell it to the people back home, I'll vote for it. And if I can't, I won't. So is it very difficult to go back to somebody who's in Beckley, West Virginia and tell them, I fought that billionaire's tax?
Never say Beckley to me. You know the story. You know how I almost got a radio job there. Stop it. Stop it.
Bluefield. I'll say Bluefield. That's another generic nice town that people may have heard of in West Virginia.
Yeah, Bluefield. I will say this though. As much as many of us would like to see somebody worth $200 billion have to cough up 5 or 10 billion of it for several years to pay for this. As much as we'd like to see that, because after all, we are socialists, we're communists, we're confiscators, we're Marxists. That's what we love. The Democrats, Joe Manchin may have done them a favor by knocking that out, and here's why: because all you would need would be the first stories that would hit, and the right wingers would do, it wouldn't matter who it is, whether it's on Fox or anywhere else, Wall Street Journal, about how X has avoided that tax by doing Y. That's all you'd need is that, and then that would turn into, see, this is what Democrats do. They think they can tax and spend, but then they can't even tax, but they still spend. So you don't want you probably are better off using already existing pathways to increasing revenue, not to be confused with raising taxes.
Right, totally different.
Like to say. So the Manchin may have done them a favor, even if it doesn't feel like that right now. I'll give him points like that. But boy, he sure looks like Joe Theismann to me, doesn't he? Aren't those guys have the same face?
Yeah, it's the same deal. It's the same deal.
Oh, look, we have a new name for Facebook. This just in. Meta, M-E-T-A. That's the new name. Meta, like the metaverse, right?
God.
Yep.
Yeah. Nice job. How many meetings did we have to go through to get that shit done?
Oh, man, can you imagine? Yeah, well, Meta.
Joe Manchin wasn't sure about that. It's a little too meta for him. He couldn't handle it.
As the great Will Rogers once said, I never met a man I didn't like. Let the meme machines start cranking right now. They will be cranking. We'll see you on Monday.